Welcome to Rising Harmful Discourse around Homelessness, what we're hearing and how we can flip the script. My name is Bree Denning. I'm from Yellowknife and I'm on the board of the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. I'll just note, getting started, that the 2024 National Alliance to End Homelessness Conference is taking place on the traditional and unceded lands of the Anishinaabe Algonquin peoples. So welcome this morning. Before we get started, Angela has an activity that she needs to introduce, so I'll let her go ahead with that.
Good morning, everyone. Sava. I'm Angela from West Neighbourhood House, and I'll be talking a little bit later, but we thought all you would want to do before you left was help us with a little bit of knowledge mobilization in your communities. So if anyone here is a doodler or scribbler, that's how I stay awake at these things. So we have provided paper for you at both ends of these tables. Some of you, I think, got handed like our door crash prizes and have pre-made little zines. I think Greg over here, you have one of those if you want to show everyone. It looks a little bit like this if it's pre-made. Julia, who is sitting in the back, in the very back row, for those of you who joined us a little bit later, she has a stack of black paper. We were not maybe quite expecting such a big room, so we went out and bought all of you guys a whole stack. You can come up and grab some from her if you want to join. And we also have some pre-folds. So has anyone here made a zine? Thought about making one? So essentially, if you just want to use this to jot things along that you learned today from today's session, that you found interesting, hopefully even inspiring, please do. You can illustrate. And then if you like what you made, find a friendly photocopier and share it in your communities. So I'm going to show you. So we maybe don't quite have enough ready-made ones, so please adopt an abundance mentality and take what you need. If you feel like you can fold a piece of paper 3 times, you're going to be good. So anyone grab yourselves, pass it down along the tables and spaces if you have some at the ends. Thank you for helping each other out. We are going to organize today. So you're going to fold it 3 times, basically in half, until you get to about like 1/8 of the size of the paper. So this. And then you come up with a little mini booklet, or you already have one. And then this is where hopefully the magic happens. It works about 6 out of 10 times when I do this. So you're going to make a tent. We're not going to clear it. We're going to make a little diamond. And then you're going to sort of fold it over. It feels a little bit like maybe using chopsticks for the first time, like kind of hold it here. And then it worked. So thank you if you want to do this. And I think we're here about funders today, so Luke, we don't need to put the United Way logo. Oh, okay, great.
All right, thank you. So everyone can attempt to figure that out, ask questions if you need to. We'll get started right away with our first presentation. Our first presentation is Connecting Movements, Addressing Laws and Policies that Criminalize Homelessness and Public Drug Use. So I'll ask Corey Ranger and Tali Magboo Cahill from the Harm Reduction Nurses Association to take it away with our first presentation.
Hello. We've got a hot mic. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. My name is Corey Ranger. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the president of the Harm Reduction Nurses Association. I've been a registered nurse working in harm reduction in both Alberta and British Columbia for the last 11 years. I'm the clinical director for AVI Health and Community Services on Vancouver Island, and I live on the unceded territory of the Cowichan tribe.
Hi, I'm Tali. I am a former board member of the Harm Reduction Nurses Association, and I've been a harm reduction nurse here in Ottawa on unceded Algonquin Anishinaabe territory since 2017.
So today we're here to talk about connecting movements, addressing laws and policies that criminalize homelessness and public drug use. What I hope that you're going to be able to get out of this today, well, I think what's important first to acknowledge is that we're going to share a story. a case study, if you will. We're going to talk about British Columbia and what started as harmful discourse, leading to disinformation, misinformation, then moral panic, which then led to regressive and reactive policymaking. While the focus of our short presentation is on British Columbia, please know this is happening in different iterations across the country. We hope that you walk away with a little bit of a better understanding of the context here in BC, but we also hope to assist you in understanding how moral panics influence policy, how a commitment to harm reduction necessitates resisting laws and policies that criminalize and cause harm, and how this work is insurmountable, thankless, and risky, but manageable if we do it together and take the lead of the people who are most impacted by the policy we are attempting to address. The principle of nothing about us without us is not just a catchy slogan.
So we just had a land acknowledgement, but I think it's really important to reiterate that, as we all know, Indigenous people face disproportionate harms from the war on drugs and from the housing crisis. And also important to point out that the drug supply crisis that we're in now is directly related to colonialism and racism, and we can't really forget that in doing this work. And we'd also like to acknowledge that a lot of the content we're providing, well, not only the content we're providing, but a lot of the interventions that we use and the agencies that we work in are based on work and advocacy done by people who use drugs. And that's really important to point out all these things, naloxone, supervised injection sites, safer supply, were things that people who use drugs argued for first. And they've now become some of our daily work lives, but they were like real struggles and advocacy at the beginning. Oh, that's also my slide. So a little bit just briefly about the Harm Reduction Nurses Association, so you know who we are and who we aren't. So we're a national nursing organization that advocates for nursing practice and harm reduction, but also for people who use drugs, so advocating for the people we serve as well. And we are nonprofit. We do not take any money from governments, funders, pharmaceutical companies. We're just our members who want to be a part of this work. So that's a little bit of the context, just because the story is a little bit about us, but mostly about the people.
If you watched Guy Filicella's keynote yesterday, this won't be news to you, but it bears repeating, especially if you weren't there, that BC has been in a declared public health emergency over drug poisonings for 8 years now. On April 14th, 2016, then Minister of Health Terry Lake declared a public health emergency, and the threshold for a declaration of a public health emergency was 996 deaths. So almost 1,000 people died in 2016, and they said this is an emergency. Flash forward 8 years later, and in 2023, 2,572 people died. So you can see that the ways in which this emergency has been managed doesn't really reflect the urgency of a public health emergency. What's also important to note that was also said by Guy is that unregulated drug poisonings are the leading cause of death of British Columbians aged 10 to 59. And if that doesn't stagger you enough, unregulated drug poisoning deaths amount for more deaths than motor vehicle collisions, homicides, and suicides combined in British Columbia. And it's important when we're talking about, public drug laws and some of the myths and misinformations that get perpetuated about people who use drugs, that we understand what are the drivers of these deaths. So this is all publicly accessible. This is from 2018. This is the BC coroners. So in 2018, they were detecting a lot of fentanyl in postmortem toxicology, and then about 5 other substances that they were typically screening for. This is in the end of 2022, where now we're seeing 12 different substances detected. It's not just fentanyl anymore. It's fentanyl, it's benzodiazepines, it's animal tranquilizers, it's analogs of fentanyl that are more potent. And this is why we're not in an opioid crisis. We're actually in a drug poisoning crisis, because there is no agency of choice. People don't know what they're taking. People aren't able to have any kind of quality assurance over what they're consuming. if they're compelled to access the unregulated supply. And this is just from this month. The coroner's released it. And so now we're looking at 15 plus substances. And we're seeing things like fluorolfentanyl and other, benzodiazepine analogs. And when benzos are combined with opioids, they produce a synergistic effect. So we're seeing people who are unconscious for hours at a time. And that is very morally distressing. And that's relevant to today's presentation because a lot of the hatred and the anger from the public discourse is misplaced. People are distressed because what's happening on the street isn't normal. There's a lot of people who are out there. There's a lot of people who are, not able to participate in society in the way that they would like to because the drug supply is so poisonous that it's taking away their agency. And this is also why we can't call this an opioid crisis, because if we do, we're going to fail to respond in ways that represent the actual trends in this public health emergency. And so you can see, I was working in homeless encampments at the onset of the pandemic, and we actually saw the drug supply shift in real time. We saw the benzos saturate the drug supply. We were hearing from support workers and peer support workers who were saying people required 10 doses of naloxone. Everybody was panicked. The overdoses didn't look the same anymore. And that's because every time we think it can't get any worse, as long as we keep criminalizing people who use drugs and doubling down on the war on drugs, we continue to incentivize the unregulated supply. It's important also to talk about how narratives are crafted and shared. And so whether it's stories of illicit smoke exposure in hospitals, people smoking crack in Tim Hortons, or folks injecting drugs in a splash pad, we saw a very coordinated effort to convince the people of British Columbia that they were not safe. And the main culprit was people who used drugs and the policies that supposedly enabled them. This is an elected MLA in British Columbia who used to be a police officer who tweeted out, "David Eby's drug legalization experiment has signaled that BC is open to businesses, to gangs and cartels." We never legalized drugs. And so we'd have to give Eleanor the benefit of the doubt because she's both politician and former police officer, that she knows the difference between decriminalization and legalization. However, that's not what's important. What's important is the narrative and how it gets shared and perpetuating the belief that you are not safe, and the reason is because of harm reduction.
The narrative here in Ontario has been a little bit different. There's a lot of talk about public safety, a lot of talk about involuntary treatment, and that being the response. So a little different from the dehumanization that we saw on the last slide, but similarly just as destructive, because it's basically kind of saying, you're not safe around these people and othering them, and proposing interventions that will not work, can't work, and are likely to result in more overdose deaths.
These narratives give rise to the drug user as deviant narrative, which is an over 100-year-old narrative designed to elicit fear, othering, and dehumanization, or the belief that some people deserve less, or that we can rationalize oppression on the basis of moral failings and transgressions. Dehumanization is a key feature of genocides. And speaking of genocides, here's Eleanor Sturko speaking of dehumanization, here's Eleanor Sturko once again, where she compared people living in the downtown east side to stray animals, and said that if these were cats and dogs, the SPCA would come and pick them up. And so we have to read between the lines in these stories, because what they're actually trying to pave the way for and manufacture consent for are things like involuntary care. Right? It creates the narrative that people who use drugs around the streets are either incapable of making decisions for themselves or they're a risk to you. And either way, the response is punitive. So moral panics arise out of these types of narratives, and it's important to understand the science behind a moral panic. So typically, a concern is reported, and it sparks some anxiety. So in BC, there was stories of a nurse who walked through some smoke in a hospital and felt like she had some symptoms, and then it became a big story that nurses were unsafe because of harm reduction. And there was hostility, right? And so the people who use drugs, who were trying to basically survive in a hospital, and obviously they're meeting their needs by using drugs, are portrayed as causing harm. They're portrayed as folk devils. And then there's a negative social reaction that's broad and unified. The media plays a huge role in amplifying messages and getting it out there. And then there's disproportionality. So the threat that it poses especially with illicit drug exposure, is blown out of proportion, right? And so the message is, you're not safe. And then there's volatility. So there's two kind of main stories that emerged in British Columbia in the lead up to recriminalization. The first was the weaponizing of drug exposure myths, where people were smoking drugs and people were afraid that passing through smoke would cause them to overdose, which was completely contradictory to what the science tells us, and that there actually is a negligible risk and that nobody's overdosed by walking through smoke ever. And it also fails to acknowledge that in British Columbia, for years now, injection drug use has gone down significantly and more people are smoking their drugs than ever before. The Auditor General actually wrote a report just last year that said BC had failed to keep up with the patterns and preferences of people who use drugs because all of our services cater to injection drug use and we don't have safe spaces for people to smoke their drugs. And then we also saw the narrative that there was an increase in public drug use, and that was because of decriminalization. What didn't get shared is that homelessness has been up significantly in British Columbia over the last 3 years, 32% in 3 years in Greater Vancouver area, and that's replicable across all of British Columbia. So, what's the truth to these two narratives?
So this is from like a police officer, a VPD inspector, who said we'd actually seen a decrease in public complaints around public consumption, and that was earlier this year. A decline in random stranger assaults in Vancouver. And then, as Corey mentioned, any of us who've ever worked in supervised consumption or around people who use drugs, who are using drugs in front of us, knows that the risk of passive exposure is close to nil and has never been proven anywhere. So this is kind of a theoretical risk that I personally was never scared of working in a supervised consumption site.
And I think it's important to acknowledge what the difference is between disinformation and misinformation. So disinformation is intentional. There are people out there who are trying to sell stories, but most of the people who are sharing these stories are, they're not up to speed on what's actually going on. They're not reading journal articles. They're scared. We hear all the time, fentanyl's killing people. And so naturally, there is a lot of anxiety, and an effective moral panic is wrapped in truths. That's the important thing, is that you have to channel people's emotions and you have to couple it with some truths, otherwise it's easily debunked. We should also talk about what decrim is and what it's not. So in British Columbia, in January 31st of 2023, there was a Section 56 exemption to decriminalize some drugs under a certain threshold for some individuals. BC had de facto decriminalization for years before this, and that's an informal form of decrim where police basically deprioritize substance possession charges, but that is subject to a lot of subjectivity from police, and so it is also a risk for profiling, and people who do face violence at the hands of police still do. And then there's de jure decriminalization, which is actually the formal process. We have to clarify what decrim is and what it's not, because decriminalization is different than legalization. Legalization allows for the regulation of a decriminalized substance, but decrim is about the response, moving from criminal to non-criminal response. And if we want to talk about what the intent for decrim was, that would be really important, because I don't think they did a good job explaining it to the general population when it was first introduced. Decriminalization was never going to significantly change the drug supply. Decriminalization was about the punishment. It was about less people going to jail, less people getting a criminal record, which impacts their ability to get a job. It's about less people experiencing violence at the hands of the police, and it's about safety. And if we wanted to actually address the drug supply, we should have done legalization, or we should have done an actual accessible, safe supply. But there was the belief that decrim was supposed to be a panacea, when in reality, BC's decriminalization was a significant half measure. So decriminalization was never about public drug use. It was never about being able to use in parks and schools and splash pads. That was already illegal. And decriminalization is about possession, not about consumption. It never allowed for people to use in hospitals. that is a decision made by health authorities, not by a federal exemption. It never allowed people to smoke drugs in a Tim Hortons, but that story was shared widely and amplified by many influencers when really indoor smoking bylaws trump decriminalization and always have. They could have just called the police, but instead they videotaped it, shared it, and said, "Thanks a lot, Trudeau," and that was the message that got out there. It was never legalization. And so if we only decrim and we don't pair it with measures to address the drug supply, there is still a criminal element, and there always will be a criminal element because people are still having to access drugs that come from the criminal market. It was never safe supply, and BC's decriminalization was already nerfed. And one of the most important things about its ineffectiveness is that it wasn't informed by people who use drugs. It was largely informed by police. Nevertheless, even though all of those truths were known to decision makers, there was a strong push to respond to concerns about public drug use. And so the BC government introduced Bill 34. Bill 34 was the restricting public drug consumption law, and HRNA, the Harm Reduction Nurses Association, were notified by drug user groups in the province of BC that they were very concerned about the implications of Bill 34. And not only were they very concerned about it, but they didn't have the capacity to respond to it. And so they asked if we would consider taking this one on. We were very concerned about Bill 34 because, one, it's permanent. So BC's decriminalization was a temporary pilot. It was only going to last 3 years, but Bill 34 was permanent. It also allowed for profiling. So Bill 34 has clauses in it where police are allowed to move people along if they're suspected to have recently used drugs. And so technically speaking, a business owner could see someone who's homeless on the streets outside of their business and say, yeah, I think they were just using drugs, and the police could displace them, and if they don't move, they could arrest them. And so if we cut through all of the bullshit, this is about displacing people, this is about clearing encampments, this is not about public safety. It's mechanisms to control and survey people who are already the most marginalized. So like directly from the Bill 34 is that a police officer, if they have reasonable grounds to believe that a person is consuming an illegal substance in a public space, they can direct the person to cease consuming that substance, tell them to leave, and if they don't, a police officer may arrest without a warrant a person who that police officer believes is committing an offense. So lots of believes and suspects and no burden of proof. And so what we heard from Indigenous groups as well, and this is from the Union of British Columbia Indian Chiefs, is that this legislation effectively recriminalizes the most marginalized people who use drugs, those who are unhoused and do not have access to harm reduction services, and sends a stigmatizing message that people who use drugs must hide out of sight, even if that means death. First Nations people are chronically and drastically overrepresented in housing insecurity, homelessness, and fatal overdoses, dying at 5.9 times the rate of other BC residents, and will be disproportionately harmed by this violent legislation. So that was enough that we needed to hear, that we needed to do something about it.
So we were successful in getting a temporary injunction to block the law coming into force. And now that's become kind of an indefinite injunction. And this context is from the judge who ruled that that this would cause harm to people, and basically like that's what Bill 34 needed to be paused just to examine that harm, and that it would be risky for people and probably cause more overdose deaths.
I think what's really important in this Justice Hickson's decision as well is that very first line. I've already set out that British Columbia is in a public health emergency. As part of these circumstances, the plaintiff argued, and I accept, that the unregulated nature of the illegal drug supply is the predominant cause of increasing death rates in British Columbia. So that's the first time there's been legal precedent that a judge has said that the drivers of these deaths is the lack of regulation, is the unregulated drug supply. Stop calling it an opioid crisis, stop calling it an addiction crisis. This is a mass poisoning situation. So there's important precedent there. And decrim was imperfect. We know that the drug user groups didn't like it, and police and the public didn't like it. And we are presented with these scenarios from the government that, well, if we can't do this, then we need to go back to criminalizing people. And so they deal a lot in absolutes. And so nobody said that this situation was ideal, But the false dichotomy of this isn't working, so let's go back to criminalizing people is harmful and lazy. Everyone deserves to feel safe, and so what we asked the government when we filed our injunction was set up overdose prevention sites in every community. Get people housed, regulate the drug supply. If you want to control people's use of drugs, then control the drugs themselves by regulating them. However, that's not what we got. What we got was recriminalization. They circumvented our injunction and they changed the amendment at the federal level and they basically ported over the worst parts of Bill 34 onto this recriminalization. And yes, it targets people who have no homes or safe shelter. They claim that it encourages people to use in safer spaces, but most communities in British Columbia don't have those safer spaces. And so what they're telling people is that if you're a person who's homeless and you use drugs, you don't have the right to exist here. Nevertheless, this is not a story of failure. This is a story of collaboration and teamwork.
We are running out of time, so I'm going to just quickly. So basically, currently, we've gotten together with 13 drug user-led groups to ask for a judicial review of that decision to recriminalize. So the story is not done for sure. So lastly, because we're running out of time, what does this mean for you, this story? It's basically, we have a few messages. One is to listen to people who use drugs, listen to people who are affected by these laws, listen to people who are already doing the work, and join a group. You can join our HRNA. There's also the Canadian Students for Sensible Drug Policy, Moms Stop the Harm. You can fight misinformation, donate to legal challenges like the Drug User Liberation Front, and just dismantle that moral panic and really ask from your leaders, like, how is this going to help people? How is this going to get people housing? How is this going to stop people from dying? And people, when you're confronted these kind of non-evidence-based strategies like involuntary treatment, like they will not have answers because they will not stop people from dying and it will not house people to put them in voluntary treatment. So ask those questions rather than kind of letting people repeat the same things that are just fancy words that don't mean anything.
And lastly, this is the connecting movements part of our presentation. So please remember that people who use drugs must be involved and lead in the development and implementation of policies, procedures, and programs that aim to serve them. And that includes the people who are most disproportionately impacted. And we have to reject the dominant narrative and framing and recontextualize our understanding of the problem and understand that while this is framed as a drug use issue, this is also an issue of homelessness. And so we need to connect our movements because we're working in silos right now and your problems are our problems and the end result is more harms for people that we all care about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Corey and Tali. Quick housekeeping item before we go forward. Please, if you need to exit during the session or at the end, please use the back door. The side door actually goes into another session. And so if they run over, we don't want to walk in. So yeah, please use the back door. Moving right along, we're going to welcome our next presenters who are going to present on countering NIMBY sentiments in the face of a housing crisis using leading engagement practices. So this is Naureen Choudhry and Eunice Mamic from Wood Green Community Services. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. After listening to a really heavy topic, I just wanted to segue by a lighter note, acknowledging that today is the 31st of October. Eunice and I decided to dress up as community engagement practitioners. And if you have been looking for Waldo, you're in luck. He's in our room. So please find him. So the topic today, as Brianni has already alluded to, that we will be presenting today is countering NIMBY sentiments when it comes to announcements around affordable housing projects, and how do we flip the script? Is it possible at all? So what we're trying to do today is to present two case studies where we think we have successfully achieved the flip the script narrative. I do want to acknowledge the expertise and talent in this room from across Canada, so I applaud all of you for the great work that you do. And if anything that we say today prompts you to share any successful stories that you've encountered, please do share them with us in the question and comment section. So imagine that we are facing a housing affordability crisis, and we, as an organization, have a project that will house some folks who have experienced homelessness or are precariously housed. And as soon as we announce the project, we encounter some NIMBY sentiments. I don't think we have to imagine that. We are living in this reality. All of you face this perhaps on a daily basis. And that's what has happened in some of our projects that our organization has worked on. Right. So what we want to do today is introduce Wood Green Community Services, the organization that Eunice and I work at. We want to talk about what NIMBYism is, in case you're not familiar. We'll present the case studies, and in the closing remarks, we'll share some testimonials that we have heard from stakeholders along the way. And hopefully we will still have some time for questions. So Wood Green Community Services is, if you're not familiar, one of the largest social services agency based in Toronto. We have been operating since 1937, so almost 100 years. Annually, we serve around 37,000 clients through our various programs. Our vision really is to work towards a Toronto where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. And when we say that, what we mean is that we serve all Torontonians from various demographics. Our clients include seniors, youth, women fleeing domestic violence, newcomers to Canada, and more. And if we look at really the programs, they can be bucketed into three groups. Housing and homelessness, where we know that there's a shortage of affordable housing in Toronto. So we currently have about 1,700 units in our portfolio, and we are aiming to increase that number to 3,000 by 2027, and then to 5,000 by 2030. The next bucket is health, wellness, and community, and in that bucket, our programs provide physical and mental health services and recreational activities and opportunities, so that our clients have an opportunity to engage more fully in the community. And the third one can be bucketed under economic empowerment, where our financial empowerment services offer a range of programs such as free tax clinics, budgeting workshops, debt management, and one-on-one counseling services. So even though I'm presenting them as three different groups, they really work holistically and as a group to serve our clients to best support them and make sure that they are on a path to achieving thriving state of living conditions. Yeah. So Eunice and I are a two-person community engagement team at Wood Green. The community engagement was officially established 2 years ago when we came on board. This is where you can reach us if you do feel like sending us an email. We have continued to support mainly housing projects, but expanding our portfolio to support our other teams if they need community engagement consultation services, if you want to call it. Our community engagement principles that we have established at Wood Green are based in IAP2 principles. Anyone here familiar with IAP2? I see a few hands. So IAP2 stands for International Association of Public Participation. It sets the global standards on what community engagement principles should look like. So I invite you to have a look at their website if you haven't already done so. Funnily enough, the IAP2 conference was held in the same venue last week. So that was the North American conference. Basically, IAP2 defines community engagement as the process of working collaboratively with individuals and groups to address issues that impact them. So IAP2 has established a spectrum of engagement which provides a framework to enhance collaboration and transparency through the decision-making process, and it increases the public's impact on the decision as we move along the spectrum. So for example, inform means that it's the simplest level of impact where the engagement team is sharing information in a one-way direction. It could be through flyer distribution, through a website launch. It could be an email or a newsletter that is pushing information out. Consult is a bit more involved, where the engagement team is inviting stakeholder input through door knocking, perhaps through surveys or other consultations and focus group activities. Involve is where we are going to the stakeholder groups throughout the project, back and forth, to seek feedback and input, incorporate and change the project design based on the feedback we are receiving, and repeating that cycle till we reach the end of the project. So this is where a co-design methodology would fit in. Collaborate is even more involved, where we are not only seeking input, but asking stakeholders to provide advice and recommendations in the decision-making process to the maximum extent possible. So this can perhaps be achieved through advisory boards. Empower is the highest level of impact our stakeholders can have, where the engagement process yields a resulting decision given by the stakeholder. So the stakeholders tell us this is what's going to happen, and we implement that. So that's a little bit of a tutorial on the approach. Just wanted to share this slide with you. Based on these values and these, this framework, we've come up with a principle, a guiding principle. We use open communication, transparency, education, community involvement, and accountability as our founding principles whenever we are designing an engagement strategy. So what is NIMBYism? And for that, I will pass the mic on to Eunice.
Amazing. Thank you, Naureen. Hi, everyone. So as Naureen mentioned, she and I have the fun task daily, pretty much, with community engagement to bring the community along the journey with us anytime there's a new housing development site that is going to be for affordable housing for our organization. And with that comes a lot of NIMBY sentiments. And so just to ensure that we're all on the same page, we do want to talk about NIMBYism very briefly. But before we do that, with a show of hands, how many in the room are familiar with NIMBYism? Amazing. So we will be very brief, and then we'll get into our case studies and talk you through how we use our community engagement tactics to counter NIMBY sentiments. So NIMBYism, we're all familiar in the room. It's like preaching to the choir at this point, so I won't get into it, but we did want to talk a little bit about why it happens. We've found that it happens a lot of time because of fear of change. A lot of people are concerned that they don't know what is going to be happening in their neighborhood. They're not willing to be open to embracing change. A lot of that sentiment of you don't know what you know until you know it. And so until you live it, until you're experiencing it, you're thinking the utmost outrageous things, right? And so there's misinformation with it, there's stereotyping, there's lack of awareness. And so you'll find that, and we'll go through some examples, a lot of our efforts were really to help educate people, to help debunk the myths and the stereotypes that people had in their minds along the way. And then some common myths that we found with affordable housing. It's really about people believing that it's going to lower their property value. It's going to decrease safety in the neighborhood. It's going to increase crime rates. And we'll get into some examples that really give you a sense of some of the comments we've heard. But the main issue for us is really just that these NIMBY sentiments can create significant barriers to the housing developments that we have as projects and the work that we're doing to address homelessness in the neighborhood and in the community. And so through effective use of community engagement tactics and principles, there are ways to kind of bring the community along to flip the script. And so we're going to get into two case studies. I'll share a little bit about the first one, and then Naureen will talk to you some more about the second one. The first one is our Cedar Vale project. Some of you may have heard about it, and if not, we're going to share more now. This program essentially is for seniors 59 plus who have experienced homelessness. It was 59 units. It is up and running now, and we pretty much call it our gold standard at Wood Green. It's very wholesome in the way that we have a lot of supports. We have a lot of staff dedicated to ensuring that all of the tenants have everything that they need and that they feel supported. It's a 3-story modular housing. There's amenities in there such as common laundry. There's a commercial kitchen where they do cooking classes together, and a couple of other programming. And then we have a multidisciplinary team that is available to all of the tenants. I share all this, and you look at this slide, there's a lot of information here. And what we found the big problem was that when we got on board with this project, the community didn't have any of the information that you just received, and that was just on that slide. And that is something that really contributed to a lot of the sentiments that we found we were hearing in the community. And so to speak a little bit more about those sentiments, in the beginning, so the City of Toronto had a community liaison committee before we got on board with the project. And then when we came on board through stakeholder mapping, we spoke with a few of the stakeholders in the neighborhood. And what we were hearing is that people were feeling not well informed. They were feeling like they weren't heard or valued. They had nowhere to direct their questions, comments, or concerns. And they just didn't know what was happening to this space that they were going to be occupying, that we were going to now be working in. And through our community engagement tactics, by the end of it, we had gained supporters. People were saying they were well more informed. People were wanting to volunteer. People were wanting to check in on the tenants that were living in the space. So it really was a 360 change that we saw in the neighborhood. And so how did we do all that? Let me get to the important part. So just to share a little bit about our approach, we had several tactics that we put in. This space that we turned into the 59 units was the community believed it was the heart of their neighborhood. So everyone felt like this parking lot that was across a community pool, a clubhouse, a school was the heart of the neighborhood. And we heard it over and over and over again. We worked with the city. They identified other parking spots that people could use, and still that wasn't enough. Everyone claimed, nope, we want the heart of our neighborhood to remain the heart of our neighborhood. And so we worked with the supporters that we did identify in the neighborhood to amplify those voices. We started out by informing people as much as possible and ensuring that they have the most accurate information. So we created a web page that ended up getting over 1,800 page views. And on that web page, it was a lot about just the basic information. It's seniors that are moving into this space. We are well equipped to take care of this facility. We're going to be having the right kinds of supports. There's going to be a good ratio of staff to tenants in the space. Just anything that we could say to make sure that people had the right information, that we were being transparent about where we were with the process, and also just wanting to build that confidence a bit. And so with that, we did some blog posts, we did some social posts, and we just kept spreading information as much as possible. We did a mail distribution through Canada Post, again, just wanting to make sure that everybody had information. So a lot of the information that was on our webpage, we turned into a flyer. We did a bit of a frequently asked questions section, and we shared that through mailers. We created a dedicated inbox. So we came up with an email address where it was dedicated to this project, and anybody that had any questions or concerns was welcome to write to us directly. They would reach us, and we could either communicate via email, or we would set up a call or a meeting to discuss further any questions or comments that they had. Naureen and I also went door to door in the neighborhood, literally knocked on doors and introduced ourselves and said, we want to hear from you. We are going to be your neighbors, and how can we work together to ensure that everyone in the community feels like they have a sense of belonging, including our new tenants. And so that was a very interesting journey, but by the end of it, after we did our 6 month, it was just such a pleasure to see that we went from being at people's doors who literally said they're going to take safety into their own hands and they're going to be patrolling the area on their own, to wanting to make sure that we are taking care of the tenants that they're seeing walking by and making sure that they know where the groceries are and seeing how they can volunteer and support. So that was good to see. And then we did, with our stakeholder mapping, when we initially kicked off, we basically identified all of the local schools, businesses, groups, as well as the neighbors. And we just made sure that we had informed them about the project and that they knew to contact us if they had any questions. So we did one-on-one meetings, we did phone calls, we did emails, a little bit of everything, and we showed up at their doors. And then by the time we were getting ready for opening and towards the end of the year, we basically held an open house. And with our open house, we were very intentional about ensuring that it wasn't just going to be a celebratory event for us where people can come in and walk through the space and see it and leave. We wanted to be a little bit more intentional and create a more immersive experience. So we actually had some of the rooms dedicated in a way where they were touring the site a bit, but they were also learning a little bit more about what homelessness is all about. So there were rooms with stats about homelessness. There was a room that was staged as if somebody was living there. There was a room that spoke to our wraparound service programs. And with that, we also invited people to be a little bit more welcoming in the sense that we had some activities that they could participate in. So we had partnered with the local schools and they had their students create some welcome cards and some art pieces. And so we had those on display, and then we invited others as they attended the open house to make welcome cards for the tenants, and we would hang them up on display so that as people were creating the cards, they were adding it to cards that were already there. And that's one of the tactics that worked best for us, I would say, is that once we found those supporting voices, we amplified them as much as possible. So there was a local church who worked with some local groups, and they created gift baskets, welcome gift baskets for the tenants. We had those on display at the open house. Again, just wanting to show people that there is support for this project here. There is support for affordable housing, and you can be a part of that support, and gave them ways to be supporting along with us. And so those activities were activities that everyone really appreciated. My personal favorite was the school next door. One of the classes walked over during the construction at this site, and they asked the workers for a piece of wood. And so they took a piece of wood that's for the railing at the front part, and they turned it into this beautiful art piece. Now I wish we put the picture of Naureen, but they made it into this beautiful art piece, and we had it on display. And that was also another way for people to come to the open house, right? Because now you're not only getting an invitation from Wood Green, you're also getting an invitation from your child who has participated in this wonderful art project and wants you to see what they've come up with. So that was a great way for us to continue to flip the script. And I would say that with the open house, there was a lot of expertise in the room to speak to the different questions that everyone had from our organization. And so people really felt heard. We had people from different levels of leadership there to answer their questions. And so people felt like they really got an opportunity to walk through and see this mysterious building that they were concerned about, that they felt, was going to replace the heart of their neighborhood, was actually just going to be another space for people to make home. We also had created an Access and Advisory Inclusion Committee, and this is a committee that was put together with local residents that had expressed interest in wanting to foster a sense of belonging in the community. And so this is a group of people that came together and was led by us initially, and then was led by the team who is directly working with this site. But what we did was we worked together to identify where are our existing relationships that we want to strengthen, and where are there new relationships that we want to create in order to ensure that everyone in the community, both existing neighbors and the new tenants that would be moving in, would feel that sense of belonging. This right here is actually a blog post about one of the events that came out of this advisory committee. They put together a community barbecue, and I'm so happy to say it was very well attended. It was in the park that's right across from the site. And at this event, it was so beautiful to see that tenants and neighbors were dancing together in this shared space. They were eating together, they enjoyed entertainment together, and it was just a lovely night, and it was just a great way to see how far we had come from the Nimby sentiments to now you're dancing together at an event where you're both feeling like this is my neighbor. And with that, we also made sure that we amplified residential testimonials. So just as loud as we were with the support that we had from community members, we were also making sure that they were aware of just how grateful and how much the residents were enjoying the experience as well. And so I'll share one of these, Johnny, and these are all anonymously coded, but this is someone who was homeless for 7 years, and he had lost his job and resorted back to drinking to cope. And he was no longer in contact with his children. But after finding housing, he was reunited with his son, and he was talking about plans to visit family in his country of origin. And he was just very grateful for the staff and the team that he got to work with on a day-to-day basis. And so that's just to give you a sense of how we would use these stories that we were hearing to share with the community that it's really great work happening in these kind of spaces, and we should be working together to promote these kind of opportunities instead of wanting to work against them. And I'll turn it over to Naureen just to briefly talk about the second case study before we wrap up.
I do note that we are running out of time, so I'm going to whiz through the next case study. Oh, did I already reach the end? Yeah, you did. Okay. So soon after the good old Cedar Vale project, we were assigned to deliver community engagement on another affordable housing project. I measured the distance. It's only 5 kilometers away. It's a similar project to Cedar Vale. So it was going to provide service housing to seniors with supports, with amenities. It was going to convert an existing church site to an 8-story building. So there are some similarities. Where it was different was that we got a really long lead time to actually plan the engagement and deliver it. So just a quick run through the timeline. In March, we announced the project. So in March and April, we came up with a strong and robust community engagement using many of the same tools and methodologies that we had used for Cedar Vale. And then we went out in May to deliver that engagement strategy. We did some research to identify where the supportive voices were, and we used, or we requested them to be our ambassadors in the community. So they were already well networked and were kind of speaking to neighbors about this upcoming project. Again, we used a lot of that push notification type of information sharing where we were just flooding the neighborhood with, anticipating the questions they were going to have, because we now had the knowledge of the Cedar Vale example. And this was leading up to the Committee of Adjustment meeting where the City of Toronto was going to say nay or yay to the project. Lo and behold, where were the Nimbys? We throughout the 2 months that we engaged with the community, we didn't get a single Nimby voice. And, we almost had to pinch ourselves to say, have we missed a group of people? Why are we not hearing the sentiments that we were expecting to hear? Well, we feel that because we implemented a strong and robust engagement strategy, the Nimby voices were either drowned or their questions were answered, so they had already flipped the script in their mind. And I guess this is a great example of effective engagement principles can counter NIMBY sentiments. And that's what we wanted to share here. At the Committee of Adjustment, we had unprecedented support from the community. We had 2 people show up in person to speak in support of the project, and we had 16 letters of support from the community members. We made it as easy for the community to show their support, so we handed each one of the, 100 households in the neighborhood with a template of what a letter of support looks like. So all they had to do was put their name and address and sign it and send it out. But that worked in our favor, so why not? Why not use those strategies that work and that, where there is support, make it easy to actually express it. So some of the key takeaways before I end on our part of the presentation is be intentional and proactive. it goes a long way with your stakeholders to show that we value them. Be empathetic. Everybody wants to be felt heard and validated in their concerns, so be empathetic. And even before we go out into the community, there are already murmurings in the community, so they are expecting to be engaged. Capitalize on that, leverage that, and just be out there, be confident. So the next one is involve the community if possible, and that's where the example of the advisory committee for the Cedarvale project is a shining example. When people feel like they can make a difference and they can contribute to the project, they feel a bit more involved and less afraid of what's coming. Developing key messages, I cannot stress the importance of that enough. Be consistent in your messaging, and if you don't have the answer, tell them that I'll get back to you, and then actually get back to them. Close the loop wherever possible. And the last one, build capacity. So that's an in-house practice where we are continuing to support our colleagues to become better engagement practitioners across the board. So it lessens our burden, and then we're delivering engagement as a team and not as two women. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your attention today.
Thank you very much. Another housekeeping note, the lunchtime plenary has been pushed back by 15 minutes as well to accommodate the fact that we started a bit late. So that will be at 11:45. So don't feel the need to run out at 11:30 for our next presentation. Our next presentation will be Better Neighbouring, Building a Community Education Campaign for the Right to Housing. I'd like to introduce Luke Smith-Adams from United Way Toronto, and Elizabeth Gallou and Angela Coe from West Neighbourhood House.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to throw it right back to Angela to start us.
Great. Will you pull up our text? Hi again, everyone. We're going to actually invite all of you. It's the morning. You've been sitting around. Move through this at your own pace. Be gentle with yourself and think about what your body needs. But this is a bit of an energizer that we use to warm up our community learning circles that we'll be talking about later. Liz here has willingly agreed to demonstrate. So stand up if you can. Some of you might be sitting a little bit close, so make space for each other. That's something we're practicing today. Okay, first up, let's loosen up, right? So roll your shoulders, shake off all those things that make us feel like we can't do things differently. The self-doubt, the fear of change. So the next thing, we're gonna do a bit of a stretch. You're gonna lift your hands, your arms all the way up, palms facing up. You're lifting up your communities. If you can, stand on your tiptoes, and we're lifting up even higher. I'm gonna end with, put your hands on your waist and stretch. Just twist as much as you can, and we're learning to see both sides of an issue.
Should have started with this.
Okay, and I'm going to flip it over to Luke.
Thank you so much, Angela. That was very helpful. What have I done? Okay, we're gonna put my laptop here. Hi, everyone. We're in the home stretch now, so let's get through this. My name is Luke. I'm with the United Way of Greater Toronto. Just want to recognize that this project and the work of the United Way takes place on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Chippewa, the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. My role at the United Way is as the manager of regional homelessness and housing initiatives. My focus is on programs and agencies that we fund that provide housing and homelessness supports primarily in Toronto and Peel region. United Way is also the community entity for Reaching Home Funding in York region. Just really quickly, a little bit about United Way. We support a network of 280 agencies across Toronto, Peel, and York. And we've established new relationships over the last couple of years to reach over 570 agencies now. After government, United Way is the largest investor in the social safety net in the GTA. But overall, we're still a relatively small funder. On average, we represent about 4 to 5% of an agency's budget. Our focus now and always is on fighting poverty. Just want to give a bit of background on the work that precipitated the engagement project that Angela and Liz are going to talk about. In 2019, the City of Toronto, the University Health Network, and the United Way signed a Memorandum of Understanding, which established the Social Medicine Initiative. The vision of the initiative is to operate a social medicine housing model, excuse me, that coordinates the delivery of housing, healthcare, and social services, ensuring housing opportunities are used to promote health equity and inclusion, optimize public investments while improving health and social outcomes for vulnerable and marginalized residents, and to integrate data and evidence to inform the supportive housing model and measure health and housing outcomes. Broadly, the initiative intends to collaborate and partner on the development of supportive housing for individuals who are frequently turning to emergency rooms for shelter due to a lack of available emergency and long-term housing options. The partnership brings together UHN's expertise in clinical interventions as well as hospital-owned lands, the city's experience developing and funding supportive housing, and United Way's network of agencies, investments, and our neighborhood-based interventions to support the initiative. This is meant to be a proactive approach to reducing new health issues by addressing social causes of poverty and needs, thereby reducing the challenges on the health and the social service system. There was a session on Tuesday that was focused specifically on the social medicine initiative and social prescription. I encourage folks to check it out if you were not able to join. So what does that memorandum mean for the community and for specifically South Parkdale? The first practical iteration of the social medicine initiative is Dunn House, which is a 4-story modular building, which will provide accessible, safe, secure, and affordable housing for 51 people from historically marginalized groups who are frequent users of hospital services and are living with complex health issues and mental health challenges. This includes seniors, Indigenous folks, and racialized people, all of who are overrepresented in homelessness. The housing model incorporates a range of enhanced wraparound supports and social services delivered on-site by UHN staff and an experienced not-for-profit housing provider, Fred Victor. I don't know if there's anyone from Fred Victor in the audience, but shout out to them, to improve tenants' overall health and well-being. To further support the success of the initiative, we invested in a community-led engagement strategy to convene the Parkdale Neighborhood Planning Table and other community stakeholders, and to create a 2-phase community education campaign to build residents' understanding of social medicine and to garner a supportive, caring community in Parkdale for future tenants of the new supportive housing building. The project is funded by United Way and managed by United Way funded anchor agency, West Neighborhood House, which is where Angela and Liz are from. And you will be hearing from them shortly. I had to find my notes for that, okay. West Neighborhood House is a local multi-service agency with deep roots in the Parkdale community. A little bit about Parkdale as a community in Toronto. It's quite a unique area. The neighborhood is well organized and has historically been an area with a high percent of people experiencing poverty and low income. The area has undergone rapid gentrification in the last 15 years, but the spirit of community-based organizing and collaboration remains strong in the neighborhood. One of our goals with this project was to amplify the voices of local residents to vocally and proactively say, yes, we need more housing, and yes, we look forward to welcoming our new neighbors. We know and we have heard today that about how public sentiments and understandings can challenge the development of new supportive housing, and we wanted to test and distill how local expressions of solidarity could be leveraged to gather support for new housing developments. One of the pieces that's of particular interest to me is to understand as we move forward if this initiative can be scaled to other neighborhoods within the GTA. The Parkdale neighborhood is no doubt unique, but our hope was to create a coherent engagement approach that could potentially be modeled in other areas. We are continuing to see massive shifts in the makeup of neighborhoods in Toronto and the GTA, and want to ensure that the voices of individuals who benefit from a strong social safety net are highlighted and reinforced, and that the community agencies that connect the residents are empowered and fortified to address the changing communities. And with that, I would like to welcome Angela and Liz to speak more about this unique engagement project. Thank you.
Okay. It's me again. But now you get to hear from Liz also. Oh, can everyone hear me? No? Oh, there was one hand, thumbs up at least. Can everyone hear me now? Better? Thanks to Mike.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, you seem louder.
This one works.
Okay. Can everyone hear us now? Nice.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Luke, for sharing about the fantastic collaboration of agencies involved and how this came about. So my name is Liz, and I'm going to share just a small amount of the story so far of us building welcoming, neighboring, and belonging in the Parkdale around this new development. Firstly, I need to say that this is the story of the Dunn Welcome Committee pictured here. This isn't even all of them. And these folks are truly the heart and soul of the campaign, a group of neighbors who came together to foster belonging. And I really learned so much from all of them about mutual aid, creating caring connections, and relationship building for housing justice.
Okay, so by way of placing ourselves, Luke talked about how we are a neighborhood center based out of Toronto's downtown west. We have actually been around for over 100 years. We were one of the very first settlement houses in Canada. So yeah, we've spent a lot of time thinking as an organization about how to welcome new neighbors. And Parkdale is one of the neighborhoods that we happen to be connected to. And it's, like Luke said, one of the very last few affordable parts of downtown. It's the kind of place where newcomers, lower income people, those with mental health experiences have found a home. And it's because of the kind of housing diversity there. It also happened to be my first home in Toronto. So when in 2020, it was announced in the neighborhood that new supportive housing was going to be built, and the public reception was, any guesses? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Yeah, mixed for sure. And some folks were happy to hear about new affordable housing, but others had concerns. We heard there's too much supportive housing here already, and some homeowners organized. So I think from everything we've been talking about today, most people here are familiar with this dynamic unfolding in our communities. And how do we shift the conversation a little bit more? So hands up for anyone who has met a Nimby. Okay, try to talk to them. Keep your hands up. Without getting mad. Okay, a few hands down now. How about try to understand them and stay in relation with them? Right? So NIMBYism is pretty common, but how do we actually shift perspectives? Well, I think if we're willing to try, we can often nudge someone to move a little from what they were thinking, and then maybe we find ourselves walking a little closer together.
At West Neighborhood House, we talk a lot about the importance of going beyond social services and supports to creating a community campfire, inviting folks to come around and share space, warmth, and stories, and actually feel like they're joining a conversation. With other partners in Parkdale, we thought it was important that neighbors wanted to be informed and they had questions. Some of them were good, others a little less founded, and we saw the division. So this pointed to a need to think about how we could support integrating the new housing with the community and share the information in a way that they would understand what the social medicine model would look like. Incredibly, there was already a group of neighbors in Parkdale called the South Parkdale UHN Tenants Association, which is SPUNTA for short, who actually live in another property owned by the UHN next to the development, and they were actually keen to welcome the co-tenants. So from these foundational connections and conversations, we put together a proposal that was rooted in existing local social infrastructure and welcoming traditions. And thankfully, the UHN and the United Way agreed to resource it. Oh, this is me. This slide shows how we funneled through different interactions to assemble our welcome committee, the photo that you saw earlier. So we started with recruiting peer workers who helped us invite neighbors to come and learn together. The Welcome Committee helped us to design a series of community education activities to draw folks into balanced and inclusive conversations where we could deepen understanding about how supportive housing is really important in inclusive neighborhoods. And we identified 5 key ingredients for our campaign, which we will go through: community leadership, local social infrastructure, policy literacy, arts-based dialogue, and relationship building.
We're still figuring out how to involve the balloons, though. So the Welcome Committee has been this incredible space for us to test and learn about how to engage each other, neighbors, in this role of championing affordable housing, especially supportive units, right? People who are the hardest to house and remain housed. We applied social network theory, a little bit like what our colleagues at Wood Green talked about. So we identified the ways that people want to learn and share information, how to engage not only existing leaders, but also emerging ones. And essentially really just figure out how to support, and by that we meant intentional investments through part-time employment, honoraria, an RFP for helping develop campaign materials that we'll talk about later. And really, I think a key part of it was also our community advisors. You can see we invited 2 Indigenous neighbors, Charlene and Jeffrey, that will be your right. And we also involved Tibetan elders because Parkdale actually happens to be the biggest Tibetan community outside of Tibet and the surrounding region. So they helped us ensure that our activities were culturally responsive and could really nourish, I think, the kind of integration we hope for.
So Parkdale, as Luke mentioned, already has very strong local organizing roots, from tenant advocacy to land trusts to Mad Pride. So pictured here is our Indigenous advisor, Jeffrey Lyon. He is Ojibwe Métis, and he's a local artist based in Parkdale. He designed this unique design to go on silk-screened totes that the Welcome Committee will use for welcome kits. And as you can see, he's chosen to amplify the message of togetherness, supportiveness, and healing. So in Jeffrey's words, the bag would be a reminder of where the tenants are, a reminder of their commitment to receiving supportiveness and healing, that this is a healing journey and a recovery journey, and a reminder that they are on the right path and they have the healing and support from the Parkdale community. And Jeffrey is modeling one of his own designs as well. The committee also selected items to fill the bags, and I would be remiss if I didn't say that our other Indigenous advisor, Charlene Grandmaison, who is Cree, taught us how to make samitize that will be used as medicine bundles to go in the kits for the Indigenous tenants. As well, we resourced local social infrastructure by allocating part of our budget for participatory budgeting. So we distributed up to $7,000 as seed funding in what we called our Neighbouring Fund. And this was for local groups to deliver and test ideas for activities to help integrate new supportive housing. And the committee got some money too. This is a flyer that they designed. I sat with them and taught them how to use Canva to invite neighbors to contribute more items for the kit. The tagline, "Be part of the solution to the housing crisis," was written by Sean, who's a member of the Welcome Committee and currently unhoused.
Okay, so another thing we did is build community literacy around housing policy, offering multiple low barrier opportunities to just engage in learning together. You see a picture here of one of our learning circles. It was hosted by Peter Martin on our welcome committee. He's over there. Shout out to Peter. He's very shyly and coyly waving, which is out of character for him, I want to know. So the community learning circles were places where we could increase understanding of concepts such as housing rights and displacement and how they really impact all of our day-to-day lives, right? And we provide these spaces to share what creates housing insecurity, but also deepen connection to what feels like remote, alien, pretty confusing policy ideas. And we did this through weaving music, storytelling, sharing food, listening to each other. And we actually covered a lot of ground. You see a pretty impressive list here up on the deck. We talked about supportive housing and what that means. We talked about neighborhood housing history and that this was only one transformation in a whole series of changes to the neighborhood. Why Housing First is a model. What is social medicine? That was probably our top question. And then we hope to offer one soon. There's a sketch here from one of our community learning circles that we did in the Milky Way Garden owned by the Parkdale Land Trust. For anyone of you who is actually making a zine, our panel does hope to be rendered for posterity with this level of artistic talent. No pressure.
Someone out there. So we used arts-based engagement to invite people into dialogue, to support them to feel and experience more of a sense of ownership over the change that was happening in their neighborhood. Our RFP for socially engaged housing justice arts was distributed in the form of a zine, and we received 13 very interesting applications from local artists. So I'd like to highlight the picture on the far right. This is an installation of clay houses that were made by community members. Erin Candela is the incredible multidisciplinary artist who facilitated 2 clay making workshops with community residents. She takes a disability justice lens to her work and invited anyone from the community to be part of these workshops. So when the clay houses were completed, we installed them in the local park temporarily and had an open neighbors night out event. And we were able to just have anybody who was walking through the park join in the conversation.
Okay, so actually you see a picture of our outreach table in that very same park that Liz was talking about. It was put together by our marvelous community development worker, Beryl M. Mark, who was one of our original peer workers, but also holds the title of self-proclaimed but largely uncontested Queen of Parkdale. And I think this is really like the whole points of this work, right? As community workers, relationship building was this golden thread that ran through every part of this project, is what kept us going. It was by far the best part. You see a picture on your right as well of Auntie Sonam, our Tibetan community advisor. She makes delicious momos. So she catered some of our meetings and has literally, I think, fed our relationships and this work to grow.
Yeah.
So this is what our campaign celebrated. The gift of a neighborhood when someone finds a home. And in Parkdale, we have incredible practices of creating homes, not just for ourselves, but for each other.
So what did we learn? The moral of the story, so to speak. There was a lot, and I'll distill just some of it here. Centering community. Community needs to be at the heart of the work. And this was a community-generated project, not an agency-generated project. Horizontal relationships are key for starting meaningful and inclusive conversations, and the peer workers were a really big part of this piece. What we've learned, sometimes the hard way, is the importance of providing trauma-informed support and flexibility to develop sustainable opportunities and pathways to employment. And this is something we're still figuring out. Trust takes time. Don't overpromise. Do show up. If you mess up, apologize. Learn, keep going, and keep showing up. By facilitating cross-community learning, you can shift the narrative. And by deepening relationships in community, you can design focused engagement strategies that respond to and tap into core values and beliefs that people have. And I'll just draw your attention to the photo on the right. This is a picture of Iris and Hope, two senior white ladies, sitting with our Indigenous advisor, Jeffrey. So Hope and Iris share an alleyway. Iris owns her home, and she was connected to the homeowners who were originally uncomfortable with the development. And Hope is a Spunta member, so she lives in one of the other UHN buildings. And they had actually never met until they started walking home together from the Welcome Committee meetings.
So we thought we were going to do a 90-minute workshop and we're going to have some discussion. We are going to instead invite you to check out, this is a fun tool that we use. We invited people to think about what they would prescribe for neighbors to create a sense of belonging. And if you are thinking at all about doing this in your neighborhoods, we invite you to start with these 3 questions. But you can also talk to each other about it at the lunch break. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have a bit of time for questions. We do have recording and translation, so I'll ask that you wait for me to get to you with the mic.
It's directed at all of you, but Tali, you made an interesting comment when you said, I might try to quote you, you said something like, we will be neighbors, so let's try and work together. And in our mixed-use affordable housing project, putting this into a neighborhood, we really struggled with inviting people from the neighborhood to come in and be part of the consultation, because they thought consultation meant they could say, you can't do it here. So how do you, and then when we said we would, well, we listened and we tweaked a couple things, but we didn't stop the project. They said that we had not been transparent or honest because we had invited them to contribute and collaborate, but then we didn't stop the project, which is what they wanted. So how do you get that fine line of being transparent and honest and not misleading them? I mean, I just found it really striking when you were talking and you said, we will be neighbors, so but we want to hear your fears and your concerns. Like, it wasn't like, we might be neighbors, so we want you to contribute. Anyway, thanks.
And then you were named, so.
But I didn't say that, though. So
Oh,
I don't know.
okay. Talia is saying this was misattributed to her. But the question was about, well, you've made some of the decisions, or maybe like the major decision, and what do you do? I'm going to start with just a personal reflection, and maybe mix it up with a confession. I am sometimes a NIMBY. I am not into public land being developed for private profit. Right? So NIMBYism is actually a very human emotion. We sometimes don't like stuff, and we have questions. So I think acknowledging that you can't expect someone to go from 0 to 10 in like one conversation is a big piece of it, and that's unfortunately sometimes I think what a lot of activism demands. Right? Like, these are our demands, and if you don't give in to them, we're going to have a protest. And there's definitely like need for that and space for that, but it definitely doesn't involve a lot of listening. So I think we showed up with ways of modeling positive responses and behaviors and attitudes. We used like really authentic storytelling and invited and resourced people to share like a genuine lived experience. And I think when you're talking to a neighbor that you're in relation with, that makes a huge difference than someone parachuting into the community and saying, hi, I'm here with so-and-so.
All I was going to add was community engagement is about managing expectations. So developing those key messages at the start of your project delivery is going to be key on what you are communicating to your stakeholders. And if the messaging from the start has been, we are coming, how can we work together? I think you may prevent this problem that you're encountering from happening. And if we are coming in not as strong, and then the community is feeling unheard, all of our activity around engagement and trust building will be effortless. You know, it will be it will have a counter impact. So just managing those expectations, expecting or anticipating what the community is feeling, doing a little bit of that research, talking to some of your neighbors and residents in the community will give you those insights and develop your messages accordingly.
Yeah, thanks everyone for your presentations today. I just wanted to give a bit of context to the last presentation because I was part of that myself. Andrew alluded to the neighborhood where this all took place. And I think it's really important to understand that if we look at our work on a project-by-project basis, we're not going to be as effective as if we look at the process as an ongoing thing. One of the great things about Parkdale is there's a village cultural expectation of participation that people learn when they move into the neighborhood. And you know, there's a skill, as you were alluding to just now, about there's a skill in participating as opposed to demanding. And it's a thing of learning how to communicate with others, how to compromise, how to be outgoing and open your group up. One of the things that we did was not just have the people in the welcome committee looking to welcome new people into the neighborhood. We made an active choice to also engage the people on the street that community building was going to be built on, to invite them in to be mentors as well. So there's ways that you can do this, but looking at it in the context of a long process of engagement and community building builds the skills in the community that can be resilient and used for anything that comes up. And I think that's also really important if you're looking for long-term success. So thank you, everyone.
Just coming to the back here.
Hi, thank you. I have a big question to ask, and I was a little disappointed that everybody was leaving, but then I was reminded that it's the remnant that do the work mostly, and so I thank you all for staying till the end. My question is, I am a victim of renoviction, and I wanted to know how many people who are here are also part of the renoviction, demoviction, expropriation process. Can people put their hands up? None. That's interesting. Well, in our situation, 4 men died. Then the building was burnt down while 2 people were living in it, and I was the guest for the night as well. So that would have been 7 people that were killed. Now, the thing is that there's a big problem with this because they want to do the 15-minute cities. How many people know about 15-minute cities? A few. Okay. So the 15-minute city basically means that they will be reorganizing this whole city, for example, Ottawa. But they're doing it in other places as well. In order to reorganize the whole city, that means a ton of people and their pets will be forced to leave what they have spent years making into their home, where they love, and their neighborhood, the friends, everything that they are used to, they will be forced out. So the thing is, what happens in that process is that people die. But then also, so do their pets die, because if the people can't stand the stress of being tormented out, if they leave their community, they may be able to find a pet-friendly place, but they may not. But if they find a pet-friendly, if they do not, what happens to their pet? But the other thing is that even moving to a new community, tons of people already know that social isolation and loneliness actually kills people. So they'll kill you while they're getting the process of getting you out, or they'll kill you later because you know nobody where you moved to. But they still want this 15-minute city reorganization because they think, well, it's going to be more handy. Well, tough. I think people want to live longer, and I think that people want their pets to live longer. And it's not only the city people, it's the farm people, where they're taking their properties away. Oh, now there's new townhouses. Now there's new other buildings. But the people are gone. What happened to the farm animals? Good question. So what I wanted to ask people is, how many think it's a good idea if we do a moratorium, we get a petition for a moratorium to stop the expropriations, the renovictions, and the demovictions until we do a referendum to find out whether the people actually want to have 15-minute cities and the consequences to themselves. Maybe you'll live through it, maybe you won't, maybe your pet will, maybe it won't. And we do a referendum so that the people have the right to say what happens in their own city, town, or country. So I would like to know if people want this moratorium to stop all this stuff until we do a referendum Canada-wide. Because I think I'm for people living. I'm also for pets living. And how about you? Because the thing is also, they're doing it everywhere. You're not safe downtown, you're not safe in the suburbs, and you're also not safe in the farmlands. So if we can get a show of hands, who wants a petition started that we will start ask for a moratorium to stop evictions, renovictions, and demevictions, and then we'll do a referendum. Anybody for it or not?
I mean, it's a political issue.
So good idea, do it. All right, thanks.
Thank you very much. All right, that brings us to the end of our time. If there are more questions, please approach our presenters and try to catch them before the conference ends. And I will ask everybody to go to rooms 1 and 2 for lunch and the closing plenary. Thank you so much.